everyone, and welcome to Global Impact. For the people who are here for the first time, a big warm welcome. So, what is Global Impact? Global Impact is a podcast. It started as a podcast, it still is a podcast, and now it turned out to be a vodcast. So, Michael Bociurkiw, who is my co-host, and also I'm Michael, and he's also the creator of Global Impact, invited me this year to become his co-host. And together we're bringing special guests, people who are knowledgeable, with expertise in different domains, technology, politics, food, wine, all sorts of different things. And we basically discuss world events and social trends. Really what we're trying to do is do our best to connect the dots so you don't have to. So Michael, would you like to tell us what this episode is about?
Sure, and I should also introduce you. This is Melissa Ritchie, my co-host, and the French-Italian actress, and Melissa does all sorts of things also around the world, so very much a great fit for Global Impact. And in fact, the past days, we've been putting our heads together and kind of mapping out what kind of guests we're going to have henceforth, and really fascinating lineup. I think everyone's going to be very happy with some of the voices coming onto the program from different parts of the world, from different backgrounds, very, very different perspectives. There's one thing Global Impact will not do ever, and that is to tell you what to think.
So, well, I have actually, questions for you because you've been on the news a lot. So tell me, you were actually on the health, what was that? The
World Health Organization, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Ever since COVID started, and when it started, I was still in Portugal, there's been kind of 2 events every week that kind of set my schedule. Clearly not the most exciting, but it gives you a routine, right? So Monday morning and Friday mornings, tune in on Zoom now and WHO weekly pressers, but that's where you get a lot of your information about what's going on in the world, and it's really fresh stuff and verifiable. So yeah, this Monday I was on the presser for the first time in a while, and I put a question to the team there about what's called vaccine diplomacy. It's something I've been looking a lot at in my book project on the pandemic. So vaccine diplomacy, just to make it really simple for people, it's when you're a big vaccine producing country, Russia, China, India, the United States, and you have vaccines in excess of what you need for your population. So you either donate them to countries you want to become friends with or boost your friendship with, or you sell it to them, usually on a at a good rate. But what's been happening, especially with China and Russia, well, 2 things. One is that they've been exporting a lot of vaccines, but their own folks are not vaccinated in big numbers. I think China is still in the single digits percentage-wise, and Russia as well. But what China especially has been doing is donating vaccines to dozens and dozens of countries that it's established relationships with. And I talked to one doctor, and she said that, yeah, it'd be naive to think that there's nothing, there's no expectations there. Of course there is, but it's not always clear. Anyway, so I asked, it was really interesting dynamics, Melissa. I asked the team at WHO, what's going on with vaccine diplomacy? I mean, is it a good thing? And 2 of the senior officials started talking, and they kind of pussyfooting around the topic, and they were being very diplomatic. And then what happened? The Director General, Dr. Tedros, grabbed the microphone at the end and said, no, this is not diplomacy. This is maneuvering. This is the countries basically, using this technique, this measure for purposes that we don't necessarily agree with. And he basically told them to stop it, that we need to get vaccines to poor countries because low and lower income countries, they have, I think the latest figure was 0.3% of their people vaccinated. Whereas in wealthy countries like the United States, I think you guys are headed up to 40, 50% for fully vaccinated and much more for the single dose. So yeah, that was really interesting
That's interesting that Russia and China don't have their population they have the most vaccines, right? When it comes to number, they have them. But why do you think the population is not vaccinated?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Well, it's two different reasons. So, of course, the coronavirus started in China. We know that by now, but they managed to tamp it down pretty heavily. And of course, it's easier to do there because it's a very kind of authoritarian society. And they got it down to very, very low numbers. So the pressure wasn't really there to vaccinate people. And it's a very, very big country, of course, huge population, very dispersed. Whereas in Russia, they cannot get people to come in and vaccinate. There is very high vaccine hesitancy in Russia, Ukraine, those post-Soviet countries. Why? Because people have very low trust in the government. So I don't think President Putin has even publicly gone and got the jab in his arm, whereas President Zelensky in Ukraine has. So, but people have a really deep-seated mistrust of vaccines. And in Russia, they're pushing the Sputnik V, which was the first COVID vaccine developed in the world very early on. So
I read about it.
And then in China, you have two major vaccine producers and a few others, but it's the two that people are being offered, but still there, not very big take up. So it's very interesting dynamics, but yet these countries are really quickly pushing out their vaccines to these different countries. So okay, and so probably now we can, head on to our special guest, right? And we'll ask you to introduce him.
So Jason Middleton. Jason Middleton is the founder and CEO of Siver Air Private Jets, a leading aircraft company located in Santa Barbara with bases of operation nationwide. Siver Air Charter's operation have earned a Wyvern Wingman certification for maintaining operational safety and is also a member of the Air Charter Safety Foundation. Prior to starting Siver Air and being a noted aviator, Jason Middleton developed his natural leadership abilities in endurance athletics, completing his first Ironman at age 15. And he has also more than 300 endurance races and 7 eco challenges under his belt. Jason created and captained the successful and widely recognized Team Earthling adventure racing team, garnering international notoriety. And Jason and his team were featured in the Eco Challenge series on the Discovery Channel and USA Network. So Jason, so obviously we know each other, and I know a lot about your background and your journey.
You pulled out some old stuff there.
I know. So, for me, your journey is remarkable. I was very impressed with where you're coming from, and you are what I would call a underdog. You're the ultimate underdog for me. The story from rag to riches. You were a Bakersfield boy, ended up a pilot, and then you become this CEO, businessman. Now, I would love for you to tell our audience your journey. So, starting from your childhood up to now, what happened?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's a lot. It's funny. I reflect back sometimes on kind of where I came from, and I grew up in a small town in Central California called Bakersfield. Really small population. It was very country. Wasn't a lot of opportunity there. Besides, my father was a police officer, and that was kind of the path there. And there was something about me as a kid. I just didn't feel right there. I never really felt at home or comfortable, even as a little kid. I also happened to be kind of a chubby kid. I was like always the bad. I was super chubby as a kid. I was chubby, terrible athlete. Was always picked last for sports, the unpopular kid, all of those things.
Oh.
And I kind of hit a point when I was in really young, middle school, where I needed to do something. So I joined the swim team and started swimming. And then I started to jog because I didn't want to be chubby anymore. And so I started I'd run 200 feet at a time and then get tired and go back home. And I just kept doing that. And then I had a friend And it's interesting when you kind of pinpoint things in your life. There's little things you can identify that steer you in different directions. And meeting this kid I actually met him when I was in third grade. And that was the thing that really turned me. It's really interesting. I know, I met him in sixth grade, and then I went into junior high. But his whole family was triathletes. They did triathlons really early on. This is back in the late, the 80s. And like, oh my God, that's really cool. And I kind of thought maybe I should try this. So I had a paper out, saved up as much money as I could, and I bought my first road bike. And I was maybe 11 years old at this time. Mm-hmm. So still really young, sixth grade. And then I just got obsessed with swimming, biking, and running and the sport of triathlon at a just crazy young age. And by the time I was 14, I was on the U.S. national team. I mean, I went from short, chubby kid, non-athletic, to 5'9", 155 pound super performance athlete within a matter of just a few years. And I just gravitated towards it. And learning that about myself, I learned that I can't do anything halfway. I'm either all in or I'm all out. And I kind of reflect back on my life now, that's the way I am with everything. I'm that way with my kids, my relationships that I have, my friends, the sports I do. Like, I surf a lot now, and I don't just surf a little bit. I go to Indonesia and surf big waves, and I'm that kind of person. And I think those things that I developed really early on, I use today. We're actually starting a new business right now inside. It's an aviation business, not what we do here at Silvera, but I'm super excited about it. I'm using that same energy and that. So I kind of got off track there. Sorry, but I became a triathlete. Was really fast. Graduated high school with very poor grades. I barely graduated high school. All I wanted to do was ride my bike, race, and chase girls in high school. That's all I really cared about. Didn't really care about school. Okay. Like, I was a normal teenager. So I after high school, I decided, I'm gonna give it a go as a professional athlete. So I turned pro. I qualified. By the time I was 17, you had to qualify to be a pro to get your pro card. And
Sorry to interrupt, but did you were you on the same team as Lance Armstrong?
I was. Yeah, we're both on the U.S. national team at one point. Yeah.
Yes.
That's big. He started his career as a triathlete. A lot of people don't know that about him, but he was a very, very, very talented triathlete at a young age. So yes, knew Lance back in the day. Our paths diverged at that point, but raced and in my I was fairly successful. I wasn't like a good. I wouldn't call myself a really good pro. I was sort of an average pro because I couldn't run. I still struggle with that weight problem. I'm not a weight problem, but I was just natural. I'm just naturally a bigger guy. And I couldn't get my run times down to compete with the top pros. So I always struggled with, being at that level and making a living at it. And then when I was around 22, 23 years old, some friends of mine who were also triathletes said, hey, we're going to go to this crazy race out in the desert put on by a guy named Mark Burnett, who, as you know, is the founder of the TV show Survivor. And he changed reality TV, but his first show that he did was the Eco Challenge in 1995 in the Utah desert. We had no idea what we're getting into. And I'm like, sure, it sounds good. And I went and did this race. It took us 7 days to get through this course. Started out with hiking and horseback riding, mountaineering, like climbing ropes, whitewater paddling, canoe paddling. It was just through the whole desert of Utah, the southern desert there. And it was the hardest thing I'd never even conceived something could be so hard. And we finished the race, barely. And I will never, ever, ever do anything like that again in my life. I'm like, that was absolutely ridiculous. And then the very next day after we had finished, I was already trying to get a team together for the next year. And and my body was built for it. I loved how hard it was. I love that. It was just hard. It was a hard thing to do. And and I wanted to learn. I was super naive about the whole thing. I wanted to learn how to do this and efficient and be really good at this. So again, I became obsessed with it. And, you know, I had a long career doing that. I raced for about 10 years. And that sport, you mentioned Team Earthlink, we're one of the top teams in the world, traveled all over the planet doing these races, you know, for a long time. So I met my you know, my wife, who we're ended up getting a divorce now, but I met her in that sport. Like that entire sport.
He's single, girls.
Yeah, that sport, getting into that sport led me turn my life again, like all these twists and turns. And I met a guy in that sport who became a good friend of mine, who was a pilot.
Right.
And he's like, God, I think you'd really like, when you're done with all this racing, Jason, you should really think about being a pilot. And like now I'm in like, I'm 27 years old, 28 years old. So I'm, you know, most pilots become pilots when they're really young. So I felt like I was kind of old, but I'm like, I'm gonna go check it out. And I lived in Santa Monica at the time, went down to the airport and went and took a lesson. And I'm like, fell in love right away. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. And again, I went at it like crazy. I got my private, my instrument, my commercial, my multi-engine, and all my instructor ratings in 1 year. I mean, I just like got it done. And I was just obsessed with it. And I was still racing at the time while I did all that. So I was like, I was training all day and then going to the airport and flying and then waking up. I was just nonstop, which is actually where I like to be. I'm still nonstop. You know, this is how I operate. And became a pilot. I'm like, great, I'm going to be an airline pilot. It was all set up. And then 9/11 happened. So I was going to go to the airline. So my career path for the airlines would have been fly for a regional airline until I get enough hours, and then go to one of the big United, Delta, American, one of the bigger airlines. And that was, you know, I was going to retire when I was 60 years old, 65 years old, whatever the retirement age is. And I would have had a good living, but that was going to be my career path. But 9/11 happened. And then I had already been hired by an airline at that time. I was just waiting for my class date to start. And I immediately, like 2 days later, got the call canceling all training dates. Sorry, good luck. Don't expect a call from us for the next 2 years.
Wow.
So I'm like, oh God, so what am I going to do now? And by this time I was still racing, but like it was, my career was my final contract with Earthlink was about over, and we weren't going to renew it. And I got a job flying cargo, canceled checks up and down the San Joaquin Valley. And in this little tiny airplane that was literally duct taped together. I mean, literally there was duct tape on it. So I took any job I could get to get time to like just prop myself up for you know, I was committed to it. Well, that company had a corporate aviation side, and I'm like, God, I'd like to. What's going on over there? I didn't know anything about private aviation, and so I learned about it, and I got the opportunity to move over to the corporate side of that company, and I just loved it. I love flying the people. I love meeting the people. I love going different places every day. I like not knowing what I was doing the next day. I just like, this is where I belong. And then I just went full on at it. I grew up, I started flying King Airs, and then, you know, the big turboprops, and then I got into jets. I got my first jet job, and just kind of grew up in that business. And then, I ended up flying charter and private. In my last job before I started Silver Air, I was flying for a guy who he was a real estate guy, and this is back in 2006, 2007, and he was smart. He was a really smart real estate guy, and he's like, Jason, there's some problems coming, and I got to get rid of everything. I got to sell. I'm selling the airplane. I'm selling everything, and so I helped him get rid of the airplane, and then I was out of a job. So now, what am I going to do? Again. And I'm like, I didn't, you know, I was always entrepreneurial. When I started Team Earthlink, that was a big entrepreneurial endeavor, raising money, hiring a team, handling the logistics, all of those things I was kind of already built for. And I just said, you know what, I think I might try to do this on my own. And so I have a partner in the company, a friend of mine who's more of a financial kind of guy. You know, I knew I had the aviation side dialed in, and he was more the financial business mind. We jumped in together and we bought an airplane, a little Citation jet, this little tiny 4-passenger jet. And we started Silver Air. And We started from scratch with one airplane.
Wow.
And we.
When was that? Which year?
I'm sorry?
Which year did you start?
So that was timing. That was 2008.
Oh, wow.
Right before
Okay.
the financial collapse. Right before. It literally was, I went into business in October, and I think like the banks were closed by November.
Yeah.
And
Ouch.
but,
Ouch.
yeah, it's actually an interesting story. And Canada is actually part of the story. I got through that. So one, I just, I was worried, but I knew I had to just work hard and just get through it. But I had one person in my life that I can point to that got me over the gap, and it was a comedian by the name of Craig Ferguson. He's a stand-up comedian, very, very good friend of mine to this day. He lives in Scotland now, so I don't see him very often, but he was touring a lot. Back then, people wanted comedy because things were so bad. His business was really good. And he's like, Jason, I just want to go on tour. Let's just go tour. And we toured all over the place. We went to Canada probably 5 times on tours.
But wait a second, were you doing comedy?
No, I was flying him.
Oh, you were flying him. Okay.
We jumped in the airplane. I was a pilot. Yeah, I was a pilot. And so I was spent so much time with him. And I mean, he toured hard for that entire year from like 2009. He just toured and toured and toured. And it basically kept me in business. And by the time, he slowed down, businesses started to come back. I had grown the business a little bit. I had a few more airplanes under management. And then we kind of had the flywheel going by then. But had I not had that one person in my life at that time, and he didn't have, and he had a need, to travel because his business was really good because the world was so bad. And I needed that one person in my life at that time, and we got together. So I got really lucky.
Well, it is a story about being at the right place at the right time and ready. I think people think things happens like that. It's not luck. Everything lines up at some. You work hard, and eventually you meet that person, or you're at the right place at the right time, and it just happens. Things just develop, and it doesn't mean it's going to be
You had 9/11, you had the crash, and then you have COVID.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
COVID.
It sounds like you're wanting to roll with the punches.
COVID. So COVID's an interesting one. It's in a lot, like this year's been horrible for a lot of people. And it's been horrible in so many different ways. Financially, my biggest, the biggest thing that I am bummed about is the mental health things that have gone on.
Oh, yeah. Good reason for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just devastating. Looking at looking at statistical information around it, it's just a huge bummer. So what I'm going to say here in a minute, I wanted to talk about how bad this has been first, because it's actually been really, really good for my business. Yeah. And I don't want to and I'm very sensitive to that. I'm sensitive that this has been horrible for a lot of people. And it's been horrible for me in a lot of ways. I have 3 kids. They've been at home alone all year. And, I mean, it's been bad in that way, but it's been good for business for a couple of reasons. It was really bad for a long time. Like we lost a lot of money this year. But business came back really quickly. And the reason we're doing so well is because I didn't get scared. I didn't run scared at the beginning of the pandemic. We decided at the very beginning of this, I mean, my partner, who is my CFO, and we argued about this. And I basically came to the decision that we're not going to lay off anyone. We're not furloughing one person. And in fact, we're going to hire a lot of people. So in April and May last year, we not only retained every employee, but we also hired an additional 27 during that time. We didn't have one airplane in the air for 2 months, and we hired 27 people at that time. We did the exact opposite of what everyone else in my business did. But out of that, it did a bunch of cool things. It sent a message to my company that we care deeply about our people. And we do, but it's really difficult to believe. Like when the CEO of a company says, hey, we really care about you, and they do little things here and there, but when it comes to really hard things, how much are you willing to do to protect your people? How committed to you are they, right? You question that, right? Until you have to prove it. And COVID has given us the opportunity to prove to our people that what we say is absolutely true. We care about them. We are here to protect them at all costs. And, and it's given us the opportunity to do that. And it's been amazing for the culture and performance of our company. So there's that. The second thing that it did by keeping people, hiring people, when things opened back up, we were ready to go.
You were on the runway, literally.
We were literally the only company that turned it on like that in our business.
You were ready, yeah.
And June did. We had our biggest month ever in June, like by far.
So what about the health and safety? I mean, what did you implement to make flying safer for your crew and clients?
Yeah, so the first thing we did was said, okay, if you're uncomfortable going out in the world, there's no penalties. You don't want to come to work, you don't come to work. It doesn't really affect the people at the office. They can work remote, but you can't really fly an airplane remote. So it really is mostly targeted for the flight crews. And, ironically, I think every single pilot said, we want to go to work. We're ready to go to work. So we did that. We made it completely voluntary to go to work. We put in what we mentioned earlier, the COVID cleared program. Well, first we had immediate crew procedures out the day this pandemic hit. I mean, we had a whole 3-page procedure on how do you interact, lower level of service in the cabin, no touch anything, airplane cleaning protocols, flight crews in masks at all times until they're in the flight, they're strapped into their seat. We did all that right away. And then we kind of made it a little more robust with the COVID cleared. We had this program where we would have a sterilized van, like a Sprinter van, pick up a client from their house, drive them to the airport, walk up into a sterilized airplane. Once we sterilized the airplane, nobody was allowed inside until the passengers got there. So get in the airplane, no pilot interaction. Pilots did the passenger briefing over the PA. Flight attendants were only there for safety, no service. They had kind of self-service on the cabin. When we landed, everyone off the plane into a sealed off van to their destination. So we would hand them off totally clear.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people who listen to Global Impact travel a lot, and a lot of folks are still stuck at home, but there's a lot of pent up demand. Can't tell you to hit the skies, especially from what you've seen, especially in America. Would you say it's pretty safe to fly right now? And let me ask as well, because we hear a lot about HEPA filters and stuff like that, but what I hear from a lot of people, it's really that pre-takeoff and landing part where perhaps air filters aren't working or air isn't circulating properly and people are bunched up together. So what do you have to say to people on that one?
Yeah, so statistically, you have a very, very low likelihood of getting sick on an airplane, catching it on an airplane. It's probably a little higher on the airlines, but there's just the data doesn't, the data's there. I mean, they've tracked all this stuff down, and it's mostly from groups gathering together in private homes. But I mean, it gets a really low infection rate in aviation across the whole, whether it's airlines or private. The reality is, if you're a passenger in an airplane, you're not going to get it from a crew member, because in an airplane, the air enters from the back generally or all over the cabin, and it exits at the front. Those, they're called outflow valves. And the air inside of a cabin, it's not refiltered. It doesn't circulate. People don't
it doesn't? I thought it did. Okay.
No. It comes into the airplane, it comes through the engines, it gets compressed. It's called bleed air, goes into an air cycle machine, which cools it. So it comes in really hot pressurized air. This air cycle machine cools it off and distributes it through the airplane, and this fresh air pours into the cabin. And then it moves forward to the cabin, and there's an outflow valve on the side of the airplane that dumps all the air outside. So it's continuously bringing fresh air in always. And it goes from the back or in the cabin towards the front. So once you're in the airplane, and that happens as soon as you get on the airplane, because the APU is running, this little generator that's blowing air into the cabin. And you can feel when you get in an airplane, there's the gaspers are blowing air. There is air coming into the cabin, and that's from it's called the aircraft power unit, the APU, which is running normally. And then and that air goes towards the front of the airplane, either out the open cabin door or the outflow valve when you're taxiing. So it's pretty darn safe to fly. You're not going to
that explain because I was a bit confused. I've been traveling a lot recently, and when you go for check-in, you have this little cross on the floor, and you have to be 6 foot distance, which is totally fine by me, wearing the mask and following the guidelines and everything to keep everybody safe. However, what I got confused about is the moment when you step into the plane and you sit down, they come in, give you a drink, a snack, and everybody's taking off their mask, and we're all next to each other, not 6 foot distance. And I'm like, what's going on here? I was so confused. I'm not afraid of COVID, really, but I don't operate on fear. But now you explained, if the air is not recycled, and so that would explain why they're not as worried as. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And the problem is they just didn't have the data. They didn't know, like, where are people getting sick? Where are they getting this? Where are they catching this from? And I think now that we have a lot of information on where the infections are coming, and there's just not very many people that have it in the U.S. anymore. So it's,
It was probably almost a year ago on Global Impact. We had a guest, Mary Jean Tully. She has her own luxury travel firm in Toronto. And we were talking a lot back then about what is the future going to look like once COVID subsides. But there's a lot of talk about people with means, wealthy people, celebrities, those types. They're going to clearly and understandably want to maintain their social distance, their bubbles. And to do that, private aviation plays a role, right? You were talking about how the jet can be your own and sterilized and everything. On commercial, that's a very different ballgame. So has part of the reason your business has done so well too is because a lot of folks who do have those means, this, believe me, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation. They are able to afford this means of travel, this means of vacationing or doing business where others can't. But there's a bit of I guess not an equivalence there between the two groups.
Well, it's what their pain points are. Private aviation is expensive. Flying on a private airplane is expensive. And most people, the lion's share of people that can't afford to fly private do not fly private. They can still afford it, but they choose not to because paying that high bill is more painful than going to get on an airline and potentially being close to other people. Now, we've seen a big shift this year. In fact, 75% of our new flyers, clients that are new to us, are new to private aviation. They've never flown a private jet before. They certainly can afford it, but they have chosen not to prior to COVID because it wasn't worth, there wasn't a health risk in their mind back then. Now there is. Now there's a reason. They can justify the cost of doing it now. So, and the other thing too, business has really changed. And this is something I'm not really sure of. We have not really started business travel back up yet. When in a normal year, about 70% of our business is business travelers, people traveling for business meetings, and 30% for leisure, family, vacations, second homes, that kind of stuff. So it's inverse now. It's 70% leisure and 30% business, which is really, it's kind of interesting to me, but it's also a little bit scary. Like, I don't know if that's sustainable or not as an industry. Like, people only go on vacations once or twice a year. People that do business trips go once a month. I don't know. I feel like business is going to come back, but with the advent of Zoom, I mean, what we're doing right now, we're having a face-to-face conversation, almost like we're sitting in a room together. There's no latency. You can see my inflection. You can see all the things you need to learn at a face-to-face business meeting over Zoom. It's that body language you need to see it's the looks, all those little things you need to be looking at a business, face-to-face, we can do right here. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a few years, I think, before we'll really know.
And do you think they'll, even prior to COVID, there was kind of a trend up to, for lack of a better word, democratizing private aviation, net jets, outfits like that, where you can perhaps buy like a timeshare. You can buy a timeshare in the operation of a private jet. So that perhaps open it up to more people, right?
Yes, it does. There's a lot of ways to fly private. You can charter a private jet. You can buy a fractional card like NetJets. You can buy a fraction in an airplane where you own a small percentage of it. You can have there's jet cards, there's membership programs, there's all kinds of ways to fly private. It really is kind of a personal thing, right? All the way up to buying your own private jet and flying it. There's something for everyone. It really depends on the person's needs, where they are, how frequent they fly, how big of an airplane they need. I do a lot of just counseling with clients and even friends of mine about what's best for them. Sometimes, like for me, I fly private occasionally, but I don't do it all the time. I had to go out to Kansas City to look at some airplanes, and I flew on Southwest Airlines.
You did?
I did. I flew on Southwest, and I was going out for work. I don't really care. If I kind of do both. It really depends on what the need, and if I need to get out to Texas for a 2-hour meeting and back in the same day, I have to take a private jet. There's no other way of doing it with the airline. Right. So it's a tool. To me, it's just an extra tool for the job. It's just something. I look at airplanes as, a lot of people look at my business as extreme luxury and something very expensive. I look at it as a piece of equipment to be productive. Most people that are involved in private aviation will tell you it enhances their productivity and their life more so than the cost. I can get 2 places. I can get out. I can buy. It's really the only thing in life you can actually buy time with. I can fly to New York. There's airplanes you can fly to New York, do a business meeting, and be back for dinner in California. I mean, you can literally do that in a private jet. So that's
So there's something I wanted to address, because I'm sure our audience wants to know about it. So obviously we live in this era of climate crisis, right? Everybody's worried about, what's going on with Earth, pollution and everything. So what's the future of aviation? I mean, do you have any idea of, is there anything, are they working on making aviation more sustainable in the future when it comes to preserving, the climate and Earth, et cetera, et
yes,
cetera?
Absolutely. In fact, one of my very close friends he started a venture capital fund to fund environmentally focused aviation companies, and things like battery technology. He's looking at all kinds from, software that can help things, to optimize things, to batteries, to battery power generation. Onboard power generation is a problem. Having motors that are he's looking at all this industry. I know it pretty well. Airbus Industries is a huge European company. They're putting massive resources into electrifying airplanes. And if Airbus is looking at it, it's a real thing, right? And so I look forward to a time when, these types of technologies start becoming, they will, in our lifetime, they will, hydrogen powered airplanes. I mean, they're looking at biofuel right now is already a thing, where they can grow.
I was going to ask about the make of jet fuels. There was like a whole, I think there's something they're working on with combining electricity. Yeah, is that this one? It's called biofuels.
It's the biofuel. It's basically made out of algae. They use algae. Okay. But the problem is they need a lot of it. It's a lot. Yeah. And
so
everything.
It's not sustainable for bigger flights or.
Yeah. I mean, the environmental thing is such a dilemma for me. And it's like, no matter what you do, no matter how we live our lives, it affects the environment in a negative way. No matter what we do. I just bought an electric car, and I'm like, how? I was like, should I get electric, gas? I don't know. I just drive around Santa Barbara, and I decided to get an electric car. And then I got this car. I'm like, I really wonder like what the life cycle of this car really is, right? So I did some research, and lithium ion that they use for the batteries in the car is a depleting asset. We're going to run out of it someday, just like petroleum. Once you use it, once it's done, what do we do with it? Right now, it's a volatile substance once it's in a battery form. The power generation that goes into that car, right? Like they have to make electricity. So I researched where the power comes from around here. And in Santa Barbara, a super environmental town, 90% of the power comes from petroleum plants, And so we're burning fuel to make energy that I'm going to put in my electric car. So it's just like, everything we do. Jet engines, I will say, have jet engines, they burn a lot of fuel, but they're so efficient at burning the fuel, they turn very little carbon into the atmosphere. It's pretty amazing how efficient a jet engine is. And the newer ones that are coming out are just getting more and more and more efficient.
So I have something I wanted to mention before we forget. Sure. You two have something in common here, because Michael covered a very, very, very sad and a tragedy, basically. Michael, would you like to talk about it?
Yeah, so 2014, July 17th, MH17 went down in eastern Ukraine after it was hit by a Russian Buk missile. And I was there on the ground, me and my team from the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe. Yeah, and I obviously did a lot of research and know the topic very well. But right before that plane went down, there were dozens of others from various different airlines flying across that exact same spot. Active conflict zone going on underneath, but above, I think it was above 34,000 feet, the airspace is open. So Melissa mentioned something that you had an airplane around there at that time or something.
Yeah, I think literally 4 hours before we had one of our Gulfstreams flying from London. We were flying from London to Astana, Kazakhstan, and it literally flew over that same airway hours before.
Wow.
And we actually couldn't. This happened. We saw this airplane. We keep CNN on here at the office all the time. And we immediately knew there was a crash in Eastern Europe and the Ukraine, and we're immediately trying to contact it. We can't track it. There's no tracking over there. We have in the U.S. It's really easy. We have live tracking. Around the world we do now, but back then we didn't have what's called ADS-B out, and we couldn't track that airplane at that point, and we didn't know where they were. We were calling the crew, and they finally landed and called us like, "Yeah, we're fine," and they didn't even know what had happened. I think they were just. It must have been they went through there before, because they didn't even know that it had happened yet.
Yeah.
And it was scary.
Yeah. Is that a concern to you? Because we had that, and then beginning of 2020, there was that shoot down over Tehran of PS752, active conflict zone. And there are more conflicts happening around the world, partially because of COVID. They're not being solved as quickly. But as someone who operates jets all over the world, do you think enough is being done to help folks like you kind of avoid those conflict zones, the free flow of information, but also some regulation as well by the international community?
So it's very complex. Every country has their own operating rules, particularly when you get into European airspace and Eastern European, they're very different. France is different than the UK. So if you fly over, the UK and then over France, you're operating under different rules.
Right.
And then Italy, and so you have to understand all of these regulatory environments that you're living in, and how to operate around it. So we rely heavily on international handling companies that they keep up on all of this stuff. And if we're doing a trip that's going to be very complex, over Russia, any of these, China, they're all different. So we'll bring them in. They'll work with our flight support team and the crew, the pilots directly. They'll create a flight plan, and they'll say, okay, do we all agree this is the best thing to do? And then everyone gets on board. And then we look at we look at they look at all kinds of things, like what are security risks in certain countries. You know, every country, we have a whole list of security risks in countries, and there's places that we won't go certain times. You know, we may, I mean, you know, ironically, Mexico has one of the biggest security risks in the world.
Is it?
Wow. It's getting better, but it's rated as one of the most dangerous places to go in the world right now, for tourists. You know, but we all go down there. We don't really care. We all go down to Cabo for a weekend. So it's, we look at this stuff. And the other thing too, we don't ever worry about a missile shooting us down, because that's just like, you know, that's just not going to happen, right? It's so unlikely. And we fly really high. Airliners fly in the mid 3s. We fly in the mid to high 40s.
Wow.
So
that's pretty high.
We're significantly higher. And any of these missiles that these terrorists have, they can't reach that altitude. They can only reach to the mid 30s.
Okay. All right. And thanks for that. And maybe before we go to the rapid fire questions, I had kind of a lighthearted question, but you talked about you're hiring staff during COVID and stuff like that when others were letting staff go. But when it comes to flight attendants for private aviation, the training for them compared to commercial, is it a lot different? Of course, they all probably adhere to they get the same safety training, stuff like that. But I'm talking maybe about dealing with folks in the aircraft itself.
Yeah, so it's one of the most important hires we have in the company. The flight attendants are the most difficult. It's the most difficult job to do it in the company out of anyone. I have actually done it. I've done nearly every job in our company just to see what it is. And I was a flight attendant for a client of mine who owns an airplane, and I did the whole thing. I did all the food service. I did everything by myself in the airplane, and it was a disaster. I was just talking to him a couple of days ago, and he brought it up. And it was that. So we hire, we have this extensive hiring process. We really look for the right people, and you'd be surprised at what we actually look for in that role. We look for. It's funny because people that have worked at really busy bars, like a big bar, and they've worked at that, and they've had success at that job, make amazing corporate flight attendants, because they are just boom, boom. They move with a purpose. Yeah. They move with a purpose. They know where everything is. They can reach around and they know how to interact. It's kind of the same shape as an airplane, and it's really interesting. That background is a thing. So we kind of look for that. We look for people with high emotional intelligence. EQ is super important in that role, because all of our clients are very different, and they have to make a very quick read of who the customer is. Does this person want engagement? Do they want me to leave them alone? Do they want me to be attentive to them the whole flight? They need to make that determination like that immediately. And so they have to have that kind of emotional intelligence and be able to read somebody very quickly and accurately. So, yeah.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So shall we? Rapid fire question.
Should I be scared?
Well,
let me start. Maybe.
This is probably one you won't have to think about very much. But your favorite airplane?
Pilatus PC-12.
And why?
Because it's a smaller airplane. Surprisingly, it's a smaller airplane, a turboprop, single engine turboprop, super efficient. You can put 8 people and load up anything you can into it, and you can fly for a long ways. And it's a really fun airplane to fly. I flew one for a long time. Favorite airplane.
Mine is the Otter, followed by the Beaver.
Yeah, Otter. Yep. I love the Otter. Twin Otter. It's a great airplane.
Melissa.
Okay. So what's your favorite wine or wine region?
Wine region. Oh, yeah. So I know that you are from France, and I just recently did a huge French wine tour. I learned about this.
You don't have to. I mean, so I know I'm here French, but
the French are super snobby about their wine. In fact, they don't talk about the grain.
I'm not.
They talk about the terroir. It's about the terroir,
that's
not
right,
the
terroir.
The terroir. That's how you say it.
I'm a simple California boy. I like San Ynez wines. It's local. San Ynez is known for the best Syrah grape in the world. So Syrah.
I agree with you.
Yep.
Okay. I haven't been there, so here we go. It's a destination. I have to go and check it out. Michael?
Okay, so it almost feels like Melissa should be asking this one, but your favorite actor or actress?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. My favorite character is James Bond, and my favorite James Bond, I think, is probably Daniel Craig. I like all the James Bonds for different things, but I think Daniel Craig is he's just, and I like him. I like him because he's not perfect. He's all scarred.
Oh, yeah.
He's getting kind of old. I kind of relate to that. Yeah, I kind of relate to that a little bit.
You do have a bit of a Daniel Craig going on here. Are you trying?
The chiseled look.
No,
and
the chiseled.
You don't have to share any names, but do you sometimes get those folks on your airplanes, from the film industry?
Yeah. We fly them all. Yep. We fly them all. Yep.
Are they easy to deal with, or?
They're almost all of them are almost, it's really interesting. We deal with celebrities, high level business people. These are our customers, the people that are in the public all the time. And more often than not, they're amazing. They're absolutely great people. The people around them are generally difficult because their job is to protect the celebrity, right? And they're very difficult.
Well, that's what they do. They pay people to do the bad job for them.
I have to back you up on that. I for a while when I was with UNICEF USA, I was in part of their celebrity handling unit. And it was always the people around them that gave you the headache that you needed a Tylenol or two. But the actors, actresses themselves, wonderful people, very down to earth, actually. Yeah.
Your favorite sport?
My favorite what?
Sport.
I'm not a team sports watcher. I'm more of a participant. I like to participate. So surfing right now is my favorite sport. Surfing. I surf. I just got back from Indonesia on a 2-week-long surf trip. It was amazing. Nobody was there
that's a pretty crazy story. I mean, the one when you told me about you went like in some very shady places because the whole cup to get there was a mission, right?
I basically had to sneak in. Yeah, I had to sneak in. And I got in and I went surfing and nobody else was there. And I surfed the guy that owns the surf camp I was at was a friend of mine, and we surfed together for 2 weeks by ourselves, and it was just amazing. So there you go.
Wow, very cool. So your favorite travel destination?
Indonesia, Mentawai, Indonesia.
Yeah.
Actually, it really depends. I've been all over the world. As a corporate pilot, I have literally been everywhere. And it depends on kind of what it is. Like if you go, there's a place in Switzerland called Verbier. It's kind of in the northern part there, or the western part. And I went there, and I've gone there twice, both times in the fall before the snow came, and it was just a magical place. I've been down to, there's a town in New Zealand called Queenstown. That is an amazing place. I love Fiji. I've been to Fiji a lot. Yeah. French Polynesia is amazing. Like Tahiti, it's a great, beautiful vacation destination, but Fiji is kind of raw. I like that kind of raw. It's still people
wild.
Just don't go there. It's wild. You go into the mountains, and there's villages that still live in what they call the bures, right? It's their grass huts. And the villagers live like they did hundreds of years ago, and they go into the jungle and they rummage for food, and it's just a cool place.
You might appreciate Papua New Guinea for that reason. I was there a couple of years ago, but before it really starts to change, there are areas where they've hardly seen outsiders still. But it's amazing.
I've heard that. I've never been, but I've heard Papua New Guinea is pretty wild still.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a couple of questions from the audience. So this is from Christian in Atlanta, ATL. Did your past as a former high-performance athlete help you in making your business a success, and how?
100% yes. And it boils down to, I've kind of condensed this down to a few things, how I've used the things that I developed and learned and gotten ingrained in me as an athlete, and how it relates to today. And the biggest thing is, there's a couple of things: discipline, but also not being afraid to make decisions. right? Make decisions based on the information you have and go with it. But also don't be afraid to change your mind once you go down a path. So I learned to navigate from this like land navigate, map and compass wilderness navigation from this guy named Roman Dial. And he's sort of a legendary Alaskan wilderness guy. He's a professor at University of Pacific up in Anchorage. And he spends almost all of his life in the wilderness hiking and navigating. And he taught me something really early on in navigation. He's like, Jason, when you get to a point and you don't know where to go, turn left. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. He's like, yeah, it makes all the sense. It's a systematic process. So you get there, you turn left and you walk off in a direction. If you realize that's not the right way, come back to your starting point and turn left again and walk out a little bit. And by a process of elimination, you'll eventually pick the right path, right? And I use that every day in business, all the time. I learned that one little thing from Roman back then, and I use it all the time. And it's just, you can put it in what it is, but you never want to go left and then right. You always want to keep the same turn going, because then you become random, right? You have a system and process for everything you do.
So a pattern to,
I like the one about once you make a decision, stick with it. You might want to advise some world leaders on that one.
Yeah.
You want to go for president in 4 years? Maybe?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Just asking.
I don't know if I could pass that back. I don't know if I could pass that background check.
Oh, okay. So hang on a second here. Did you miss out on telling us anything about you?
I'm kidding.
Any bad stories? I don't know. Are you a spy? I mean, I know the whole Daniel Gregg and bombs.
Starting that up, isn't it? Yeah.
I don't know. You know, traveling and.
You never know.
So we have another question from Joelle from Washington, and she's asking, what is your greatest accomplishment and your greatest failure? Oh.
Well, it's interesting. Failure is something that I don't even look at. I don't even think about. I've had a lot of failures. I haven't had any massive failures, but I have failures all the time, and I don't even care about it. I have zero regret. I have zero, I look at it. I don't know. I just look at it all as positive because I've learned, and I encourage my team to fail, like work it, fail it, change it. And, they call it failing forward, and failure is something that's very powerful, and failure is better than success, because you learn, you have to change. It makes you evolve. It makes you, and people that never fail also, if you never fail at something, are you really putting yourself out there? Are you really being vulnerable? Are you really exposing yourself and taking some risks? And, and it's, there's people that just don't fail, right? They're afraid to fail at anything, but they don't really ever do anything either, right? So I just look at failure as like such a positive thing. Greatest accomplishment and, in business wise, getting Silver Air through this year is probably the greatest thing I've ever done. This year has tested every single fiber of my business mindset, my emotional intelligence, my empathy, everything that I have that makes me has been tested this year. My patience, my discipline, how much I care about all of that, how I care about people. It's been tested. So getting this business through this year is probably it, I think. I have a lot more coming too. I have a big project on the works that I can't tell you about.
I was gonna ask, what's in the future for you?
You'll see.
You can't tell? Oh, come on.
When you're ready to tell us, you let us know. Have you back.
I'll be talking to you in about 6 months.
Okay.
Sequel.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think we went through pretty much everything. There's always more, but it's been an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And
wow.
yeah,
it went by quick.
It went by quick. Yeah. There was so many interesting things you shared with us and the people. And
we're thankful for your time.
No, I appreciate you guys, wanting to do this and including me and letting me tell my story a little bit. I always enjoy speaking to smart people and and telling this stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jason. And
yeah, thank you. Look forward to meeting you in person one of these days.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can do it in person next time.
You bet. That would be the best.
For sure. Okay, guys.
Take care.
All right.
All the best.
You take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you for listening to Global Impact. We'll be back soon for another episode. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast platform to be updated on the next episode, and also on the podcast, which happen to be on our respective channels on YouTube.
Yes, and let me add my thanks as well to everybody. And as we always like to do, we'd like to remind everyone to use that technology, which we all have, to reach out and touch somebody. There is still a lot of people who are still in lockdowns. Our guest, Jason, was talking about the mental health aspect of the pandemic. A lot of it kind of hidden beneath the surface, people not talking about it. So what we really encourage you to do is to reach out, who perhaps someone in your life who you haven't heard from for a while, or you haven't contacted for a while, and just check in and see how they're doing. It's really amazing to see what a quick text or a voice message or a call can do to help someone during these very, very challenging times. And hopefully we will all be out of this soon. And don't forget to, we're not going to remind everyone what you need to do in terms of health protocols to protect yourself, but continue doing that until we're in the clear on this one. So I add my thanks to Melissa's for joining us on this episode. We will be back soon with more very intriguing, impactful guests. And until then, stay safe, and until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.